So it's important that we need to study both types of flows, whether they are rotational, whether they are irrotational, and the simple reason is that both type of phenomena occur in real life and we need to study them. And therefore that is the basic purpose, that why studies of elements of kinematics is so important. And there are four broad categories that I mentioned that we can broadly define. I have said it earlier, there is translation, there is rotation, and then there is a relevant item, strain or rate of strain, and then there is shear, and so on. So all these things are very important. And then attached to that is mathematical sophistication. We need to first understand what a given fluid flow is and how that fluid flow can be represented in terms of mathematical equations. What parameters, what variables we need to introduce in an equation so that the equation and its solution represent a realistic flow picture of the particular flow that we are under consideration, that we are considering. It's important also to understand the role of what we call as material derivative that transforms from Lagrangian representation and Eulerian representation that I had also mentioned in my earlier discussions, that there are two ways when it comes to representing in terms of equations, mathematical variables, x, y, z, and so on. So there are two broad methods that exist in mathematical treatment of the subject. One is known as Lagrangian and the other is Eulerian, both after the names of these famous mathematicians Lagrange and Euler. We also need to study this to distinguish between various types of flow visualizations and methods of plotting the characteristics of fluid flow. Since fluid flow or the flow of fluids is a very visual subject. So anytime we find its mathematical solution, mathematical representation, or representation of the flow, then we need to plot its graphs. We need to show it and demonstrate how it is behaving. And therefore, plotting of graph is very important. We need also to appreciate the many ways that fluid move and deform. By definition, fluid deforms just when the external any force is applied. And therefore, in whatever way, in whatever situation or it deformed, we need to understand it, we need to be able to represent it in mathematical terms. And then it's so important to differentiate between the rotational flow and irrotational flow. And there are certain fineness, there are certain important things that we need to differentiate between the two. And obviously, vorticity play a major role in rotational flow and its existence. And we need to understand the usefulness of Reynolds transport theorem also. We will talk about it later on, but the kinematics, the vorticity, the mathematics that are involved, all these things it will help us to understand the things that I mentioned, plus what we call as RTT, Reynolds transport theorem.